Good morning.
Good morning. It is May, May 19th, 2024. And our discussion this morning, our talk, I'm calling it a discussion because I'm planning to do it a little bit like an interview of Bob. And let me see, let me admit someone. And please mute yourself, those who've just entered. And so our talk today, or our conversation or interview, whatever you call it, is your spiritual power. And I wanted to talk about that because this is an interesting situation to be in, to be our age, to have been in this teaching for
40 years old.
45 years, to have used this teaching in very powerful ways to assist and create instant healings and knowing that, using the power of our knowing, our minds, to know that we're healthy, and when we get sick, to know that we're getting well and have fabulous results. And the concurrent dilemma with that is that as we get older, um, and and I'm asking myself, am I buying into that belief system that as you get older, you get sicker? And we just did a class last week, Pamela Gray and I, and we, those of us metaphysicians, don't believe that, and yet I seem to be observing it all the time. The belief that when you get older, that means you have to get sicker. And so the dilemma is this: I believe in the power of the mind to connect with the power of the universe, which we call God, and know the truth, which is that we're perfectly whole, well, and complete. And yet, I seem to notice that my peers and I at this age seem to have more health challenges than others. And of course, we see people make their transition or die. And that is preordained. We like our dogs and cats have a lifespan that we are expected to live here. Now, it can be quite a long lifespan, everything from 60 I mean, from old age, everything from 60, 65 to 105. But nevertheless, we're not going to live any longer than that. So we know that we're destined to make our transition. Some people call it a graduation, to graduate to the spiritual part of life where we are eternal beings. And yet we also want to use our spiritual power to keep ourselves as healthy and vibrant as we possibly can be. So, Bob, I'm going to ask Reverend Dr. Bob.
She doesn't do this
And
anymore.
you recently had a little stint in the hospital. So how do we reconcile those two?
Did you say stent in the hospital? Right. So now,
Yeah, you had a little stint in the hospital.
right,
Yeah.
now I have two stents, and one old one and one new one, and just the first
So
one.
how do we think about that? And how do we use our power? I'm sorry, I
That's
interrupted.
okay. No,
That's not an interview.
yeah,
Good interview.
please conduct the interview. Well, I was thinking that actually I wanted to work with an analogy, or have to look up analogy versus metaphor, but work with an analogy of the situation. This thing called aging. First off, I think what's really, really important is that we recognize the need to see ourselves as in a classroom that we signed up for with an assignment that wasn't designed to necessarily be easy. And so if we can imagine that this life was an assignment that we said yes to, and that there's going to be some really rigorous courses that we're going to have to pass, and that we said yes to those classes. I can remember when I went to the university to get an education. One of the things that I discovered was there was no party time. There was not.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah,
It's supposed to be
exactly. I
college
went to have,
party.
yeah, I went to have as good a time as I could have, and I can remember complaining that I had to study when I wanted to play. But I also recognize in this life that what we have to do is to say, this is a class I signed up for. If it's a rigorous class, if it's a class that demands a great deal of us, it probably means that we signed up for a difficult course because we had the need to have the education or the information that that course would give us. And so I think that we often see difficulties in our lives as obstacles that we shouldn't have, rather than lessons that we can learn from in order to be able to graduate. I think old age is graduate school. And I say old age is graduate school because there's lessons that you can't learn when you're younger, that you can only learn when you're older and you've had the experience of being younger. And I think, the instant mobility that you have when you're little, I mean, being able to put your toe in your mouth if you want to, because your legs bend so easily, that when you fall down, you sort of roll around and bend, and you don't break anything. That's wonderful in the beginning because we need that flexibility when we don't know how to stand, we don't know how to walk. We need to be able to fall and not break anything because, we're just learning. But once we get past that initial education, once we get past the secondary education, the courses are more difficult. And I think we're often not prepared for the courses to be more difficult, for the learning to be valuable for us. And I think that that's a mistake that we're making. So I'm going to suggest first off that our classroom, if you will, is a lot like an exercise program. And I want to move back to the spirituality. This is about exercising your spirituality. How do we exercise our spirituality?
And specifically your spiritual power.
Your spiritual power. So you could take up an exercise program after you get a broken arm or broken leg. Your physical therapist will tell you, be careful, be gentle, maybe wait until it's healed a little bit more before you start doing that. We often employ our spirituality, or make an effort to employ spiritual principles or ideas that have not been used or developed when something's broken, rather than when things are not broken. Our spiritual life really needs to be developed when we're feeling good, when we're feeling capable, so that we have enough mastery over that experience, enough skill to be able to apply it when things are really tough, when things are really difficult. Here's the dilemma, though. If you've ever started an exercise program, and I've started many of them because it's always a good idea in the beginning, you start this exercise program, and the first thing you notice is that nothing really changes except you hurt the next day. And then you do it for a week or two, and you get used to having some pain every day, but nothing really seems to change. Well, you know that the day that you start the exercise program, things are changing, but it doesn't feel like it. You can't see it
Doesn't
right
feel like
away.
it's getting better, does
If,
it?
if anything, it feels like it's getting worse. I wasn't tired yesterday until I took my bike ride and I came home and wanted to take a nap. What is this exercise thing? So the problem is that if you do a really good exercise program, the benefits are discrete, they're subtle. They don't jump out and say, wow, look at how you look, how you feel. Other people, in fact, will notice the benefits of your exercise program before you will. Now, imagine that your spiritual exercise program is even more discreet, is even more subtle, that in fact there is no apparent evidence of anything having changed with your spiritual practice. Well,
For example, when people first start learning to meditate, they find it boring and difficult, very difficult to
yeah,
sit still for even 5 minutes.
they're looking for something to happen because the way we typically measure quality of life is by happenings, measuring happenings. And if nothing appears to be happening, we think that nothing is happening. So the dilemma with spiritual practice is that the spiritual practice, if done well and done regularly, does not appear to produce anything. In fact, one could even argue, and often have argued, unfortunately, that there is no such thing as spirituality; it doesn't even exist. And so, why am I even doing this? Why am I talking to an invisible source that doesn't talk back to me, and nothing happens? So, why am I bothering to do this? And that's an especially difficult question to ask when you feel alone and isolated and difficulties are occurring in your life that you don't know how to manage. So our spirituality is always going to be an invisible, well, not always, but for the most part, will appear invisible to us, will not be within our senses grasp. And so because of that, we often enter into a spiritual practice with a lot of doubt and a lot of questions.
So by spiritual practice, we're talking about two things, affirmative prayer
Yes.
and meditation. And we often define those by saying, affirmative prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening.
Mhm.
And we are human beings. We're here to be. And yet many of us really become human doings because we've been rewarded for doing things and not for being. Being in our culture is often just considered lazy. You're not doing anything, constructive. And so when you learn to meditate, at first it seems very boring and very hard to do. And 5 minutes may be a real stretch for you. But as you learn to make that 5 minutes, 7 minutes, maybe 9 minutes, you'll find that you get into the being part, and it's eventually being fed being fed energy and love and support from all that is non-physical. And it can be an hour, easily an hour bliss. And so, but you have to get past that you're not a human doing, you're a human being. And I just want to say briefly, when we talk about affirmative prayer, we're talking about the form of prayer that we've been taught in New Thought, which is very specific, but it's basically uh, giving thanks for what you want to happen as if it's already been happening. It's already happened for you. And so that is what we mean when we say action and doing the spiritual work, that using your power. That's using your power, because the first time that I started doing it, I started having miraculous results in health in my family. And that was the first time prayers had ever worked for me. I think all prayers work, but I mean, did not see immediate results. So it's the way Jesus prayed. It's the way Jesus prayed. Jesus never asked or begged for anything. He said it was so. So be it. And that's where we got the model. So I'm going to
And it is so, even when we often don't notice it. So I was talking to somebody recently who said, I don't understand that this friend of mine, he drank scotch every day for the last 30 years of his life, smoked a cigar on weekends, and lived to be 105. So, and he said, so apparently alcohol and smoking doesn't harm everybody. And I said, well, imagine that this person might have lived to be 110. And so what we tend to do is to measure things on the basis of appearances. But if you're doing positive prayer treatment for yourself because you're dealing with a condition and you're seeing yourself not being held hostage by the condition, you see yourself living more fully in spite of the condition. You are diminishing the effect of the condition on you, first off, period. Secondly, what would your life be like were you not to do that? And so when we say that prayer helps or prayer works, we don't mean that you get 100% result that you'd like to get. You get according to your ability. You get according to your stature, your spiritual, physical, and mental stature. And so I can treat every day of the week to be tall, and I'm never going to be tall. But if I treat every day and see myself as tall, I may suddenly notice that I'm surrounded by people who can reach things I can't reach. I may notice that I have a step stool that I can use more comfortably than I could in the past. I will overcome that issue with positive prayer by being in the condition that allows me to observe and participate in the life working. So it's not a black and white world.
and that's what Jesus meant in the New Testament when he said, who of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit to your height, to your stature? So
He was talking about me.
he was talking about us, that that often miracles happens with your affirmative prayers, knowing that the power is God's and you give thanks for it. And yet sometimes your thoughts do not do it. And so it's kind of a dilemma. And in the class we took last week, one of the questions was, do you believe that old age has to be associated with illness? And of course, no, I don't believe it has to be. But is that my experience? Is that what I see a lot of? Yes, I do, because I have a lot of peers my age. And so we wanted to explore that topic.
I think
One other thing I wanted to mention is that another thing that I and other ministers and prayer partners are practitioners of this teaching, and they can really, sometimes when you have trouble praying for yourself, you call a prayer practitioner and they will do it for you. And that is very powerful because they're not feeling any symptoms. And that's what they're trained for. But I've talked to them, and that often many of us quit doing this affirmative prayer for ourselves. We just generally expect to get better, to feel better, to not get sick. And we think that's enough. And what I'm coming to realize right now is it may not be enough. We may need to actually go through the steps and do affirmative prayer for ourselves and our wellness. Although I do think that by and large, our prayer practitioners get sick less often, way less often than other people.
And even when they are sick, they don't have to be sick in all of the dimensions of their being. And I think what I see with some people when they get sick is that they basically cash in their chips and say, it's over for me. And even if they don't die from what they're sick from, a part of them dies because a part of them has given up living. And so using affirmative prayer is to say, I'm in a graduate program. The pain is part of that on occasion. Struggle may be a part of that on occasion. And learning is a constant thing that I'm willing and glad to be able to do. It's a privilege to be in a graduate program. And I think when we view our aging process as a privilege rather than as a dilemma, we begin to see the ways in which we can practice our maturity. We can practice the wisdom that we've accomplished in it being expressed. We can see it being expressed. That's pretty extraordinary. So what I'd like all of us to do that are over the age of whatever age you think is old for you, to see that you've enrolled in a graduate program. And that in a graduate program, there's definitely things that you can't do either because they're no longer necessary, they're no longer valuable, or they're simply out of reach because the things you're reaching for now are requiring more of your attention. They're requiring more of you. At the end of the day, the end of our life, when we graduate, we're going to, I think, move into a dimension in which we get a chance to review the education we got, the things that we've learned. I don't think there won't be that part of our life that didn't have any value or any meaning. There may be parts of our life that we didn't realize was as valuable and filled with meaning as it was. So our task is to imagine that this life we're living is in fact an important, valuable life that we've said yes to, and that the learning that we're doing, we've said yes to, and that it's not going to be necessarily easy or difficult. It simply will be what any educational program would be.
Indeed. So we're going to close with one of these affirmative prayers, and not right yet, but when we close, and I'm going to go through the steps to remind people, because this is very powerful for yourself or for others, and it is using your spiritual power. You can know things and not be using them. And I discovered that when I left my work as a practitioner and a staff minister and went back to college and studied psychology. And, I was learning lots of new things that were interesting. And I knew this truth about the power of spiritual affirmative prayer, and yet I wasn't using it. And so after a number of years of this, I came to the conclusion, especially when I went back, found another church and went back to that church, I realized that knowing it was not using it. And so that's why our title is, using your spiritual power, because it's a gift. We are part of God, of all that is. And as we use it, we're creating as God creates. And that's our gift. That's our gift. So why not use it?
And we're using it all of the time, whether we know we're using it or not. And when I say that, there was some research that was being done, and that an individual who played a particular musical instrument was listening to music when he was in an MRI. And what they noticed while doing the MRI was that a part of his brain was not just listening to music, a part of his brain was actually playing the instrument that he had played. And so what I'm suggesting to us is that when we have a spiritual practice, when we do spiritual mind treatment, when we do prayer, the brain is actually doing something, even if we don't see it. The brain is moving in favor of the thing that we're seeing. There's chemistry to thought. And if that weren't true, we would not have what we call the placebo effect. People would not get better when they imagine they've gotten a solution to a problem. So our ability to see it, know it, feel it, experience it in our consciousness has a great deal to do with our ability to see it and have it and recognize it and nurture it and have it grow. And if we don't do those things, then how would we expect it?
So I think I'm going to close. Is it time to close with an affirmative prayer?
We could. Okay.
Oh, yeah, we'll do that, and then we have a couple things we want to show you. So let's go into prayer now, and let's know. And I'm even going to stop and say which this is step one, acknowledging that there's one power, one life, one God, one mind, and we are one with it. That's step two. We are part of it. We're part of it. It is an energy, a creative energy, and it is us
So there
in
is a power.
spirit.
There is a power for good in the universe. We accept that this power exists and is a part of us, that we are connected to it, that we are one with this divine intelligence, divine power, divine good that exists in favor of the life that we are living.
And so we know that our bodies know everything that they need to know to be in optimal health, that every action, every organ, every
Every cell.
process, every cell knows exactly what to do to maintain perfect health.
And we agree to invite that to happen. We agree to allow ourselves to enjoy that this is happening.
We fear no ideas of aging correlating with poor health. We know that we are healthy, whole, and complete right here, right now.
We are not a condition. We are a divine intelligence operating in a body that we have said yes to, that is thriving right here and right now.
So we give thanks for this knowing. This is step four. We give thanks for this knowing. We give thanks for this feeling of assuredness that this is true for us. We release this prayer, we release this idea to the universe, knowing that it is accepted and manifested. And for this, we give great thanks.
And I'm going to step back and say that for those of us who, in the process of doing this, are saying to ourselves, I hope this works. I wonder if this is true. What we can do is we can argue in favor of our own well-being. We can say, and why not me? And why not have what I've asked for it be so in my life? There is no reason for it not to be. I cannot argue against the very thing that I've said yes to. So therefore, I agree and say yes to it. And we call that the argumentative step. Because for some of us, when we do a positive prayer, there's this nagging voice in the background that wants to put it down and make it wrong. And we have to be able to take this to the spiritual court of law and win the argument.
I actually used that in one of my statements, but I didn't point it out.
Yeah.
I think I said something like, there is nothing in me that
Right. Can hold me back, stop me,
yeah.
or limit that from
So
happening.
that's
But for those of you that are new to this or that are practicing this and have find yourself arguing, not necessarily in favor of your well-being, but being hopeful. And another thing that I've learned with that for me was always useful is that because my brain wants to figure things out, it likes to make sense of everything. I would interject, and this is not something that we teach, but something that I've learned myself, is that how this is going to happen is not up to me. It's a mystery that I allow and invite. And I love being able to say it's a mystery, because when I can allow it to be a mystery, I no longer have to spend my time trying to figure it out, because I can figure myself out of almost anything that's good for me. When I say figure myself out of it, I don't figure myself into it. And so allow it to be a mystery, allow the wholeness that you're looking for, that you've affirmed, that you've said yes to show up however it's going to show up, and allow yourself to be surprised and enjoy that that's so.
indeed. So now we would like to share a couple of things with you to invite you to support this ministry. What happened here?
Desktop
No,
one.
not wanting me to share a screen.
Okay.
Share screen. Had it open. It's not there. Share what? Allow, okay. Open system settings. Looks like I can't do it right now.
Okay, just talk about it.
Just talk about it. Okay. So,
But those of you that feel that this has value and that would like to see us continue to do this and want to help be a part of and are a part of this, we would like to invite you to go to our website and.
which is CSL, standing for Center for Spiritual Living. CSL, palmbeaches.org.
And support us according to your ability. And we are here because, in fact, you have been supporting us, and we say thank you to those of you that have, and we say thank you to those of you who are getting ready to and hadn't realized it was a possibility. And so please share with us if you can, however you can. And feel free to connect with us or any of our practitioners
On that website.
on that
They're
website.
called spiritual coaches.
Yeah,
And there's a ways to donate button at the top, along with the spiritual coaches section, which has all of our prayer partners and their phone numbers.
and
Contacts.
they know what they're doing and they're good at it.
Yes, they are. Yeah, and that was something that we covered in the class last Saturday, was that, boy, when you are sick yourself and you don't feel like you have the even the strong belief that you can pray for yourself and have it work, call a prayer practitioner. They are not hindered by the same fears and beliefs, because you're feeling it and they're not. So they can do great work for you. All right, let's see. The other thing I wanted to tell you about that before we close the recording is that there's one more class in this series, and the series is called Empowering Your Decisions. We've covered main areas of life, health and happiness and creative self-expression. And so we have one left, and that is living richly. And that will be mid-June on a Saturday. I believe it's June 15th. And it's a 3-hour workshop, really, from 1 to 4 Eastern time. And it's just very, very valuable. A lot of good information. You get a copy of the video later. The cost is $100, and we invite you to attend. It's not only about how to manifest more finances in your life, but just living richly, regardless of what your circumstances are. There are ways to do that have your life can be much more rich than someone with 10 times the income you have. So we invite you to check that out. So I'm going to end the recording now.